What dark family secret were you let in on once you were old enough? Why the neighbors moved? Trigger warning for violent crime. I was pretty young when this happened, so the details won't be perfect, but the story is otherwise true. I grew up in a coastal town and we had some neighbors whom I really liked. My parents were friends with them, their kids were roughly my age. Wonderful. We played together all the time. One day they very suddenly moved. I was a bit confused as there had been no clue that they were going. I remember some police cars and the moving vans weeks later, but that was it. My mother told me that the kid's grandmother had become very ill, the cops came to tell the family, and they left emergently to care for her and never came back. I was only about 5. Seemed legit. Many years later, as an adult, and long since moved away from that area, my parents and I were reminiscing over our old home. I mentioned that I wondered whatever happened to them. That's when my mom told me the truth. The parents had gone out that night on a date and left the kids with a 14-year-old babysitter. When they returned home, they found the sitter murdered. Someone had broken into the home and SA'd, then killed the sitter. My mom stated the cops think the sitter pretended to be the only one home to protect the kids. When the parents got home, they checked the kids were safe and set them back to sleep. The police obviously immediately came. Once the kids were hard asleep, the parents picked them up, put blankets over their heads, asked the cops to be silent as they walked them out, and took them out of the house. They gave the kids the same story my parents told me. Grandma was sick and they were going to live with her. Grandma dutifully played along with the ruse for several weeks until the parents could find a new home to live in. The kids were kept unaware of what had happened just mere feet from them, as they didn't want the kids to be forever terrified of it happening again. Not sure if the kids ever eventually figured out the truth of that one. Another secret. When I turned 21, my grandfather told me a story about his older brother that I had never heard. My great-uncle was a big boozer for most of his life. He passed at 92 and by then had switched from liquor to beer and wine. He also cut down to 1 pack of cigarettes a day instead of 2 after he had half a lung removed. Paps and my uncle grew up on a farm in the 30s and 40s. Mostly the family ran the farm by themselves, but from time to time they would hire drifters on as farmhands. In 1950, my uncle and one of the farmhands were out drinking and they were driving back to the farm in my uncle's convertible. My uncle was the one driving and he misjudged a turn that had a steep bank on the right side. He ran the car up the embankment, which was steep enough to flip it. My uncle was thrown from the car, but the farmhand he was drinking with was only halfway out of the car when it landed. Pap said he was severed clean into 2 pieces. Because the farmhand was just a drifter without any family to make much fuss, and because the Korean War had just started, my uncle was able to enlist and avoid any criminal charges. He was in Korea until the end of the war. That was the only time I've ever heard that story told, and although I would never be someone who has more than a few drinks before getting behind the wheel, it's something that definitely sticks in my mind. And it's a story I'll tell my own kids when they get their license.
If you've made it to the end of the video, then please consider liking and subscribing before you go.